Good morning, students. I hope you are well and welcome to your first practical. So in part A, we did bromination of alkenes. As you guys can see, we started off by adding approximately 1 milliliter of cyclohexane, cyclohexene, maleic acid and distilled water to each test tube. So separately, like I did it here, I wrote on the paper towel to make it easier for you guys. After we've added that 1 milliliter, we took bromine water solution and added 3 drops drop-wise into each of the following solutions. Please make sure that you guys take notes of all the reactions happening, how it looks, what colors are showing, is it homogeneous. Okay, so after the bromine water was added to the solution, please close the bromine water. It has a very bad odor. And then you guys need to record all your observations on your practical report sheet, part A, for this part. In part B, we did the oxidation of alkenes, where we placed a 0.5 milliliter of each cyclohexene, maleic acid, and distilled water into each separate test tube. We then took approximately 1 milliliter of saturated sodium bicarbonate and we added it to each and every test tube. We added 1 milliliter to each and every test tube. So, to ensure more favorable reaction conditions, the system was made alkaline by the addition of the bicarbonate solution. How does this supply hydroxide ions to our solution? So maybe while you're watching, you can think about answering those questions too. And finally, we added potassium permanganate to each of these test tubes, only 3 drops. Please note all the observations in the video. So we added these drops, we gave it a mix, and then we set it aside for 5 minutes. You guys will see some movement around the lab during this 5 minutes while we are waiting. So while we are waiting, try and optimizing our time as best as we can. I started preparing for the next section already. For example, by getting test tubes, washing previous test tube, washing the droppers, and setting my chemicals together for the next section of the work. Okay, so for the next part, we had to repeat step 4 to 6, but exchanging the sodium bicarbonate with 2.5 molar of sodium hydroxide solution. So I already started throwing in the cyclohexene, the maleic acid, and the water, distilled water, into 3 new test tubes to get ready for our next section in part B. Good. So here we have our chemicals already thrown in. Our next step would be to add 1 milliliter of sodium hydroxide solution instead of sodium bicarbonate. I just gave it a little mix. And then we had to add 3 drops of our potassium permanganate solution. Also, you guys can Google why do we add potassium permanganate and what does it tell us. Ooh, pretty colors. This is really a fun practical, guys. Okay, again, we are setting it aside for 5 minutes. So while you guys are waiting for that 5 minutes to finish the observations, you guys could have started putting part C's chemicals together and so on to optimize your time in the laboratory as best as you can. Guys, so please try and describe what do you see when looking at the test tube. Describe your colors from what color did it initially have? After adding what reagent, what did you find, and everything like that. So please note down before and after adding new chemicals if there was any change in the colors, the textures. Please note everything down on your report sheet in each and individual sections. Good. So let's start on part C of the experiment, where it's the oxidation of alcohols. So again, we placed 1 milliliter of each, 20% methanol, 20% ethanol, and distilled water in 3 separate test tubes. We then added sodium bicarbonate, 3 drops to each of the individual test tubes. And we gave it a good mix. Just note the coloring and the textures as you can see on the video. Afterwards, we took 3 drops of potassium permanganate solution and we added it to each test tube, mixing it very well and leaving it untouched for the next 5 minutes. Again, while we are waiting, I am taking the methanol, the ethanol, and the alcohol, the water, methanol, ethanol, and water, and I'm preparing my next 3 test tubes for the next section of the experiment, in part C. This section is similar to the one in part B, where we are just going to exchange sodium bicarbonate with sodium hydroxide. Also, a little side note is to note the time it takes for change to happen. Did it happen immediately? Did we first have to swirl it? Did it take 5 seconds? So just note the rate of change. How fast did it change from our initial addition of chemicals? Okay, so starting off on the next part, we already have our methanol, ethanol, and water added to the test tubes. So now we are going to add 1 milliliter of sodium hydroxide and mix the solutions. So I decided to mix the solutions after adding the permanganate indicator. Please note the color differences, note how fast it changed. Please be thorough in your description of what you see. Good. So after preparing for our next practical, as part of the practical, we took salicylic acid and we added it into a test tube. So this is to do an esterification where we add an alcohol plus a carboxylic acid to give us an ester. This is one of my favorite practicals because here we can smell the goodness. Unfortunately for you guys, you won't be able to smell it, but you are more than welcome to Google salicylic acid and methanol gives what esters smell. Okay, so after adding the salicylic acid and the methanol, we added 5 drops of concentrated sulfuric acid. We then made a heat bath using a small beaker. I added too much. Okay, to let our test tube stand in the warm water bath for about 5 minutes. While we waited, I decided to get started on part D2, where your instructions said ethanoic acid and 1 pentanol. So in this practical, we used acetic acid and 1 pentanol. Okay, so you guys can see there, I took a new test tube, added acetic acid, added pentanol, and again added 5 drops of concentrated sulfuric acid. Okay, again, I forgot to wipe my beaker. I just added some descriptions. Okay, so in a beaker, again, I made a water bath, nice and warm, added too much again. And then I added my test tube into the warm water. So by the time I was finished with part 2D, the first one already almost stood for 5 minutes, and we can continue with the practical. Good, so 5 minutes were up, so I took out the test tube and I let it cool for about a minute to room temperature. I went and got a piece of paper towel so long because we are after adding 1 milliliter of distilled water, we are going to add a drop on a paper towel and smell it. Okay, so there we added the water. I have my paper towel, and then we just add, too much, about 1 to 2 drops in on a paper towel, and then we can whiff it. Never ever add the paper towel directly to your nose. Always add it away from your mouth and use your other hand to whiff the smell. Good. In our second water bath, I think we are almost done. Then we can do the same for this one as we did for experiment D1. So here is just letting it cool to room temperature. Adding our water, having our paper towel. And I did smell it. Okay, for our final reaction, it's experiment part E. This is organic acids, looking at litmus paper. So here I have acetic acid dripping on both blue and red litmus paper. So go look up why it remained the same colors, so we can try and explain it better. So the blue litmus paper remained blue and the red one remained red. Okay, we are then going to take sodium bicarbonate, 1 milliliter, and drop it into the test tube. After we've added saturated sodium bicarbonate, we are dropping 1 drop of ethanoic acid into this. There we can see. Then note the observations, guys. What is happening there? There we go. Now you guys can see more clearly what is happening in that solution. So next up, we are going to add 1 drop onto litmus paper. That was a bit of an epic fail, so I decided to get another red litmus paper and show you the difference. To a second test tube, we added a spatula pinch of the solid benzoic acid. And then added 1 milliliter of distilled water, and we mixed it well. It was quite a challenge to mix. So please note what you see. So we waited about 30 seconds, and you can note down the observations. I even added a bit more water to show you kind of what you should see. After that 30 seconds, we added 1 milliliter of the 2.5 molar sodium hydroxide solution. Oh, here we have the litmus paper. I'm sorry, I forgot we first had to do the litmus paper. And you see the red litmus paper remained red. Please go search what that means. And here we added the sodium hydroxide. So it is 1 milliliter of sodium hydroxide to the test tube. And then we gave it a little mix. So please note the observation and compare it to the previous observations. We're going to place 1 drop after adding sodium hydroxide onto red litmus paper again. And the red litmus paper turned blue. Please go and check why is this happening. After the litmus paper, our final step was to add 1 drop of hydrochloric acid to the test tube. I gave it a little mix and then added 1 drop of that solution onto another piece of red litmus paper. Okay, the red litmus paper stayed red. And that is our experiment for today. Thank you guys for joining, and I cannot wait to meet you guys in person. Enjoy.